I'm excited to chat with you, so we'll jump into it. Bo, thank you for joining us on the pair program. This is another bonus episode of a mini series that we call How We Hatched. So this will be a fun discussion to hear a little bit more about your unique career journey, where you kind of came from, how you arrived at this current point in your seat today as the CEO and co-founder of Lithic. So I always like to start by having you provide the listeners with a quick overview of Lithic and the problems that you all are solving here.
Awesome. Yeah. Tim, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. So, really quick, Lithic, we were founded in 2014. And basically, we built infrastructure that makes it easy for developers, fintech companies, software companies to issue debit and credit cards. So, you think about like the cards that you carry around in your wallet. We build technology that makes it easier for companies to produce those. Not the actual plastic manufacturing, but the technology that powers and routes the transactions and helps settle those transactions.
Like the behind the scenes,
Yeah.
people are quick to swipe, but they don't know what's going on, but through the different layers and systems of whatnot. So
Exactly. We build the plumbing, the infrastructure, all that stuff that powers kind of the movement of the money.
love it, love it. Well, it's certainly an important area that you're tackling. Let's flash back. Let's talk a little bit about your journey and start from the roots. Where did you grow up and what got you into the world of tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Kansas, and I always say, in many ways, I kind of got tricked into the world of startups. And what I mean by that is like I started building websites in high school with my co-founders Jason and David, and at the time, this is in the it's around 2005, 2006, and um, it was relatively easy to build websites. There's like less competition. Ad spend, CPMS were not less optimized, and so we built this early cloud file hosting company, kind of an early Box competitor back when Box was still a consumer product, and got pretty fortunate in that like it just kind of took off. And we sold the company before we went off to college, and we were like, gee, like startups are like really easy. Like you just build it and people come, and we're just like high school kids, right? So after college, I joined this incubator called Hatch. It's basically an incubator within this larger company called IAC, and we incubated like 10 companies, and so maybe it was like eight or nine, 10, something on that order. It was a handful, and pretty much all of them died except for one, and that one company was Tinder. And so that was like a really interesting kind of firsthand experience into like the world of tech, like venture-backed startups. Um, and basically in around 2014, Jason, David, and I teamed up, and we had this idea for building a easier and safer way to shop online, and we launched what became privacy.com. And from there, we actually took the infrastructure that we built for privacy and decided to kind of productize it for other companies.
All right, so a couple of quick things. One, we're not in Kansas anymore. How many times have you heard that from folks that you hear they're coming from Kansas and then coming to you went to MIT, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And now you're in New York. So quite a change of pace. You met your other two co-founders when they lived with you in Kansas.
Yeah, so the story actually is Jason and I grew up down the street from each other. So we were neighbors. We went to high school together.
Cool.
David actually grew up in the UK, and we met on the internet. And so at the time, I think we were like 13, 14, and we got introed by a mutual friend who we both met online in a chat room. And so we were like, he was like, I think 12. And so it was sort of this like, business intro brokered by a 12-year-old between like a 13 and 14-year-old.
That's
Um,
incredible.
yeah.
Co-founders meeting in their early teens. That's wild.
Yeah.
Um, Cool. And so then, the transition from what'd you study at MIT? What were you
I
really
said I
passionate about?
studied I studied math at MIT. And the thing with math at MIT is it's actually the most flexible major. So you can kind of there's a fair number of like classes that you can take, and there's a pretty broad diversity of like experiences. It doesn't have to just be math. It has kind of fairly loose requirements, and that kind of was what drew me to the major.
And so you're studying at MIT. You graduate and you stumble into the incubator opportunity with Hatch. Um, would you say that you pursued that, or somebody recruits you into Hatch? I'm thinking back to your startup, that you created, in your early days. Is that something that stuck with you, and you said you wanted to kind of keep in the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, I was so after college, I actually wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And so I was visiting New York, and a friend of mine from college was at Hatch and was like, "Hey, like, this is pretty cool. It's startups. You get to, work within a bigger company. It's like interesting exposure." And I kind of just picked it based on, that. It was like, "Hey, like, there's a fit here, and it seems pretty interesting." And I think just the opportunity to kind of like see a bunch of companies being built
Mm-hmm.
was really pretty unique. I had always known that I wanted to do something in startups and tech and product, and it was kind of a natural fit in that sense.
Would you say that the incubator also gave you a little bit more insight into, maybe what kind of verticals were interesting to you? You obviously are, you went into the fintech space. Was fintech something that you felt was of interest to you, or did it just kind of fall into your lap?
Yeah, so I would say the incubator more gave me like exposure to like different, ways of building an early stage company. Because one of the cool things is like they brought in a lot of like entrepreneurs, like repeat entrepreneurs and serial founders, and um, it was really cool to be able to kind of see their different styles up close. In terms of like fintech in particular, I've been always interested in fintech. I've had my share of experiences with poor experiences with PayPal, and specifically, and in my early days, and so it always been kind of interesting to me, like like how money moved and why these systems worked the way they did, and why it was hard to like scale like stuff like fraud systems, and just generally, if you think about it, like we're talking to each other on what are effectively supercomputers. If you think back to like 15 years ago, like why is it that we still, when you want to buy something online, you're pulling out a piece of plastic with a static 16-digit numbers etched onto it, and punching it into your supercomputer, right? So the industry's always been kind of fascinating to me.
So you're kind of scratching your own niche here. It sounds like, and incubators in general too. I think that experience at Hatch is also very fascinating. The ability to see how companies are built in early stages. You probably got a little bit of exposure into venture capital at this point too, of just like how to build on a budget. When's the right time to maybe take money and not need it at certain points. Um, would you say that some of the connections that you made at Hatch were folks that followed you into the early days with privacy.com?
Um, No, so not really. The team at Hatch was pretty small, and kind of had pretty divergent interests. We've kept in touch over the years, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them are my closest friends, and so that's been that's it was a really formative experience. But no, like we didn't end up working together. Haven't yet.
Got it. So what year did you start privacy?
We started privacy in 2014. I
2014.
think it was, I want to say we incorporated in July of 2014.
And it's you and your two co-founders?
Yeah, that's right. We had this idea, virtual cards made really easy. So think kind of like LastPass or 1Password,
Yeah.
except for your card info. So anytime you go to checkout page, you have a browser extension installed, you click a button, and boom, you get a brand new card number.
Yeah, I was researching. I think it's a really creative idea. Is privacy still around, or is that something that you kind of sunsetted after? Yeah,
It is. It is. And so Privacy Today is like one of the leading providers of virtual cards for consumers in the US. And the way to think about it is like, it's one corporate entity, but effectively privacy is a customer of Lithic.
Hmm. So privacy is B to B2C. Lithic is B2B. When did you make this? I guess when did you have this kind of aha moment of let's make this pivot. Let's maybe focus a little bit more into building Lithic for from a B2B perspective.
Yeah. You know, it was a little accidental, where there wasn't like sort of a binary moment where we're like, oh, this is the way to go.
Mhm.
It was gradual. So um, we launched privacy on a legacy card issuing processing platform, and over the years, I think it was probably over like 2 or 3 years as we scaled privacy. Um, we basically like continuously ran into issues with our legacy partner and ended up having to build our own processing. Um, and in the process of doing that, um, we basically developed this point of view on like kind of what the market needed. And so um, the two things that we realized were, first, like it's way too expensive and way too painful to launch, and second, like even as you scale, like these like issues start continue to crop up, where reconciliation, transaction processing, things go down. They change their APIs on the fly. It just becomes very painful to scale, and so we built this like kind of modern solution for ourselves, and we had customers actually that were basically reverse engineering our mobile APIs to get access to our APIs, and we were like, hey, like, look, we're already kind of doing this for folks because they're reverse engineering our APIs. Like, why not see if there's like a bigger opportunity here in terms of unlocking this for more folks.
So this, what year was it that Lithic kind of really started to gain steam?
I'd say we opened it up in 2018 or 2019, and it really started to take off in 2020.
And so the team that you had built at Privacy, were they all the team that was kind of working towards Lithic, or did you bring in outside folks? Or a little bit curious on how this transition happens between the Privacy to the Lithic kind of pivot.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I always say been at this for 8 years, going on 9 years now, and kind of have had two startup experiences in one. In that, like the first couple of years, we were like almost like a bootstrap company. We hadn't raised that much money, raised like less than $10 million. Like the team was like around 20 people, like really, really sort of like small company, tight knit. It's not like we're like huge now, but over the past couple of years, like we had this sort of really tight knit team. As we went into infrastructure for other companies, we really kind of brought in more folks and had to scale up the team in order to kind of invest in the reliability, the consistency, the go to market motion, all that. And so we've scaled the team pretty substantially. In terms of like, sort of the decision to go into processing for other companies, one of the nice things was like everyone on our small team of 20 or so people at Privacy were like had this like firsthand experience of like working with the legacy provider. And there's nothing like kind of that firsthand experience to give you kind of the confidence that, hey, like this is something that the world needs. Like the thing that we realize is like the reason why most of the financial system works, the way it does, everything from consumer banking to B2B payments to lending, the reason why it kind of works in this way isn't because like people don't have good ideas. It's in large part because like the underlying systems and infrastructure was largely kind of built before the internet or mobile phones were really kind of mainstream. You think about these companies; they're really profitable and like big public companies, but they're like still built on systems from like the 80s and 90s.
It's an interesting opportunity, I think, that presents itself too. I mean, I'd see it as a time where you as leaders, right? For you said about 20 folks at this point that you had been have been building with you at Privacy, to get them really motivated and excited for the future as well. Did you give folks the option of staying a little bit more at Privacy versus fully jumping into the Lithic world, or was it something that was, optional?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a work on what you're interested in, and it
Mhm.
generally both of them broadly align with kind of what we want to do long term as a company. If you think about it, working on the infrastructure of Lithic is, indirectly helping privacy anyway,
Mhm.
as sort of a customer of Lithic, and so yeah, I'd say it shook out pretty well in terms of like what people wanted to work on and what we needed as a company.
From a culture perspective, obviously things sounds like things started to change and change fairly rapidly for you, once the pivot into Lithic came about, from a growth perspective, right? From a numbers perspective, funding's coming in at this point, and you're being tasked to kind of scale a little bit aggressively. What are some of the things that you miss from those earlier days when you were growing those, 5 to 20 folks? And are those things that you still try to capture and keep in your culture as you get to this point where you're at now, which is what's your current kind of head count?
Yeah, we're about 130 right now,
Okay.
and I would say all things equal, if you can keep the company small, like that is that's better. Just in terms of like you think about like as you hire more people, you end up with more overhead, more communication challenges. You start to really need to think more about like organizational structure and like in general, it's sort of a inevitable fact that like company as your company becomes more successful, you need to grow headcount. But there is sort of a real organizational cost there, that I don't think maybe in like maybe this year folks will think more about it as the economy has changed and shifted. But like in general, I think during like growth phases, people don't really think enough about like the efficiency loss that you get when you hire a bunch of people. In terms of like the culture early on, like I'd say like the things that we really valued and I liked and we still aim to maintain is like sort of this high trust and like high context culture, and we've really tried to encode that in our values. And I know like values are kind of hokey, but when you think about like what they are, like they're really sort of this like shared vocabulary to talk about like the things that you care about and are important in a company. And if you don't have values or articulated values, it's very hard to influence and to sort of shape the type of culture that you want to build at the company.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually a talking point that I wrote down here. I wanted to discuss with you because I thought that you had really interesting values, company values. The some that stood out to me was, be a good neighbor, build a great neighborhood. Um, but when coming up with your company values, is this something that you looked across, the company and kind of crowdsourced, or was it something that you and the founders kind of came to the table with, over a couple of long nights and kind of figuring out what is it that we represent, and then run it by the teams? How did you come up with that? What kind of exercise was that?
Yeah, it was definitely an iterative process. Whenever I think about decision making, right? Like you can make decisions by yourself and move relatively quickly, but you just generally get less buy-in on those, right? Like and sometimes it's important to make those decisions not in a committee setting. On the other hand, like if you make decisions in a committee setting, it's going to be a lot slower. Um, but you're going to come up with like much more perspective and you're going to come up with much more buy-in. And values are one of these things where like values are just words on a wall unless like people are bought in and really believe in the values. And so in terms of the process, I think I forget which there are a couple like pretty good guides out there online in terms of like running a process. But basically the idea is like, your values are really like work that like, you should spend like a good amount of time soliciting input, getting ideas, wordsmithing with folks so that people really feel bought in on them. And I actually think that as companies grow, it makes sense to kind of continually re-audit your values and revise them. We haven't done that yet, but it is something where it's like, look, like when we came up with our values, we were something around 30 people. And it wasn't that we didn't have values before, it was just like, these were kind of implicit. And, now that we're 130, like, we've got 100 people that have joined since that, didn't have a say in the values per se. They joined the company, and that's one component of it. So yeah, like I think it for us it was definitely an iterative process.
Yeah, I like that too. It's the type of thing. So we're a small company. We're about 22, and we put our values in place when we were about 8, and I would say even just that small amount of growth, right? It's something that you want that next wave of folks to feel like they're a part of something, and I think values gives them some say in a part of the business that's it's not just about transactions and revenue. This is the core of who we are as a team. So I agree with you. I think it's a really interesting thing to kind of look at those and audit them and have them evolve as the company evolves. Um, Something I tracked on your all's kind of social media was a company retreat that you all did last year. Um, Really cool picture, by the way. It looks like you got a healthy crew together. Tell me about that. What went into it? Where'd you go? And what do you think were some of those standouts that strengthened the team as a result?
Yeah, the retreat. So, I mean, we're a remote first company. We have a office here in New York, but folks can work pretty much anywhere around the country. And as part of that, like I think doing retreats, doing one company wide retreat a year is important for building that connection in person. And so for us with this retreat, what we've really focused on, we did it in LA,
Mhm.
um, and we focused on just building connectivity with folks, not just on their teams, right? Because like you've got folks that work with each other day in day out and know each other, but like it's this idea of like how do you give people more context on like the company? How do you give people more context on like different functions? How do you? We flew in one of our customers and did a customer panel, and that was like really good. Just like how do you expose people like to as much of that as possible? The other thing was really like you know, there's a lot of things that you can do remotely and over Zoom, but like, what are the things that like you can't do unless like you're in person, right? And it's like brainstorming sessions or like uh, you know, just things like that, where like you kind of get a lot of value from being in person.
Was it kind of like a hotel that you all stayed in, or because thinking about that many people, it's tough to get everybody under one roof. So I was curious to hear like the level of immersion, like where people were staying in hotels.
Yeah, so we got a block of rooms in a hotel, and the nice thing of doing it in a hotel is like you also get like space, conference space as
Hmm.
well, and they're used to helping take care of like food, amenities, and all that stuff. So
For sure.
um,
Cool. So the company, you all have uh, gone, gotten funding as well from some pretty reputable VCs like Bessemer Ventures. Curious to hear, from your point of view of, why do you think these VCs invested in Lithic?
yeah, definitely. That's a good question.
I mean, I
Uh,
know that
yeah,
everybody has their stories of pitching to tons and tons of VCs, right? And so I'm always curious to hear what it is that what do they believe in.
yeah. So I think if you I'll start with like sort of really the opportunity. If you think about like the anatomy of a credit card transaction, there's two sides, right? There's the side that helps merchants accept cards, merchant acquiring, and there's the issuing side, card issuing processing, which is what we work on. And the Stripes, the Addians, the Squares, the checkouts of the world, they've approached acquiring in this way that abstracted away a lot of complexity and made it super product and developer focused. And in doing so, they actually like dramatically expanded what the world of acquiring looks like. Square did it for SMBs. Stripe did it for developers and online e-commerce. The list goes on, right? And it wasn't like they actually like were taking market share from any of these legacy guys. Like they were actually like sort of expanding the pie. And that's kind of what I think about what we're doing on the issuing side. Like, there's this element of like kind of lowering the barrier to entry, and you effectively become this sort of bet on developer creativity or human ingenuity. And what's exciting about that also is like from a end user and like individual perspective, like I think about it, what we're doing is like kind of doing our part in terms of enabling builders to make the financial system and financial products like substantially better.
Mm. Yeah, an interesting space. I'm curious on your end in terms of, we're kicking off a new year here in 2023. What do you think from Lithic's perspective? What can folks get really excited about with what you all are building this year?
Yeah, so I think so. We're a financial infrastructure company, and so the development cycles for us are pretty substantial. We're fast and moving, we're nimble, but like it does take time to really kind of make these investments and build infrastructure. And so 2022 for us was really kind of this year where we had this like baseline infrastructure, but we spent a lot of time, a lot of energy in terms of investing in sort of up leveling this infrastructure. And so 2023 is really about like kind of this like increasing commercialization of the infrastructure, productizing and commercializing this infrastructure that we invested in over the past couple of years. We're going to continue investing in infrastructure, but it's really kind of like focusing on specific verticals, specific segments, and kind of in terms of feedback loop, like there's sort of this like tighter customer feedback loop that we're looking to have in 2023. And so that's really exciting to me. On the flip side, we are still continuing to make these really interesting infrastructure bets. And so there's also like no shortage of like interesting infra problems to solve.
Let's dissect some of that technology that you all are building with. What's some of the tech stack that Lithic's building with?
Yeah, so we use a mix of languages. We use Python. We use C++ on the back end. We use Rust in parts of the stack. In terms of the front end, we use a lot of JavaScript, like most folks.
Mhm.
So it's a pretty diverse stack, I'd say. We're built largely on AWS. What's interesting is also because we're doing transaction processing, there is actually an on-prem component when it comes to interfacing with the networks. So
Mhm.
there's some like interesting tech challenges there as well.
Neat. Are you all hiring? Going into this year, what kind of positions or roles are you hiring for this year?
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, we are hiring. Like most companies, we're being pretty measured and pretty thoughtful on the hiring front. We have a pretty robust team, and um, the economic climate's obviously pretty uncertain right now. So we are selectively hiring across engineering and other key functions. So.
So when you hire, would you say that you tend to hire for like a general skill set, or do you usually look to fill a need on a very specific team?
I would say on engineering in particular, we're pretty opportunistic. And so there isn't necessarily, like what we found at least is like it's much specific fintech domain expertise is useful for
Mm.
sure. But given a trade-off, like we would much rather hire a skilled engineer who has no fintech experience and train them up and get them familiarized with the industry, because we found that smart folks can pick this stuff up pretty quickly.
Interesting. What is the general lay of the land of your tech teams right now? What's the size of those tech teams, and from a maybe engineering and product and data teams?
Yeah, so engineering, product, and design and data are about, I'd say about 50 or so.
Well,
Yeah, about 50.
almost a third or a little bit more than a third of the
Yeah,
company
it's
is
it's a little more than a third of the company.
nice. Good stuff. Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot on the horizon for you guys, and I love the story. You know, you're the first person I've talked to that's met their co-founders when they're in their 12, 13, 14-year old. So I think that's a really, really interesting, journey that you've got, Bo. I'd love to transition us into a segment that we call the 5 second scramble. And in this segment, what I'll do is just kind of spitball a few rapid fire questions to you, give you 5 seconds to answer. You can go a little bit over if you need to, but try to keep it as brief as possible. You ready to jump into it?
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
All right, cool. Explain your product to me as if I were a 5-year-old.
Oh man, that is that's tough.
That's tough for your house.
Yeah, so we as a 5-year-old, oh man, that's a tough question actually.
Yeah,
I'm taking more than 5 seconds here.
that's cool.
Um, really, we make it easier for people to make new credit cards. I think that's probably the most concise and simple explanation.
Yep. See, I could digest that as a 5-year-old. I can totally see what you guys are doing. Um, again, what problems are you all solving?
We're solving the problem we're solving really is like kind of twofold, right? And this is really informed by like our own experiences. It's way too hard to launch a new credit card or a debit card, and even after you get started, it's really hard to scale and innovate. And so we're solving a twofold problem. One is the launch, and the second is like kind of scaling of the offering.
Who are your users?
Our customers are really like brands, software companies, potentially financial companies, any company, any technology company that wants to issue or launch a card product.
What's your favorite aspect of working at Lithic?
Uh, I'd say my favorite aspect is spending time with customers, spending time with customers, understanding their use cases, their products. Yeah, that's I'd say that's my favorite.
What aspect of your culture do you most fear losing with growth?
I think one of the things that I really appreciate about our culture is that it's a relatively high trust culture, and I think that is something that's really hard to scale.
Hmm. What about your work keeps you up at night beyond the economy and everything?
I think the service that we provide our customers is really, really mission critical. And so when we go down, like transactions stop
Mhm.
getting processed, right? And so the mission criticality of that is a pretty heavy weight to bear.
For sure. Yeah, it does sound like a pretty stressful burden right there. Um, what type of engineer would you say thrives at Lithic?
Yeah, so I'd say we're we're kind of this mid-stage company, right? We're not a like, 10 or 20 person startup, but we're also not like a 1,000 or like 10,000 person company. So it's sort of I think there's a mix of like you have to be able to work well with others. And there's not enough like sort of just yeah, that you have to be able to work well with others. But there's also enough like kind of like um space where if you feel strongly about a product thing or if you feel strongly about something the customer needs, like you can get it done. And so it's a really kind of interesting middle ground right now that we're in, at least from what I've seen.
Cool. Who's a tech entrepreneur that you find fascinating?
um I mean, I feel like you gotta say Elon. Just like he's super, it's really fascinating, right? It's not necessarily a style that I would emulate, but it's certainly fascinating.
It's super fascinating. I think he's a everybody's got a hot take on him for 2023. Like what's going to happen to Elon?
Yeah.
Um, favorite cereal?
Um, Cheerios.
Nice. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
What do you love the most about yourself?
Ooh, that is an interesting question. Um, I'd say I'm an optimist. I think, and you kind of have to be working in startups, to get through the hard parts.
Yeah, preach, man. We need more optimism in the world. So I think that's great. Um, do you believe that there is life on other planets?
Yeah, I mean, kind of have to.
Hmm. Favorite app on your phone today?
Favorite app on my phone. Um, I've been getting into running more. Just outdoor activities. I gotta say Strava.
Nice. And then favorite superhero?
Batman.
Batman. It's
Yeah.
the number one answer.
Is it
Um,
really?
it is, yeah. I mean, it's the right answer too. So that's that's it, man. You nailed it. You did not stumble at all. Except the first one was a little bit thought provoking with the 5-year-old product, which is I've heard something that like a lot of VCs kind of pitch is like, all right, simplify your product for me and break it down real nice and easy. But you did a good job of it, and the story of Bo Jiang and Lithic is very interesting. I'm glad you're able to come on and share it with our team. We're excited to see what you guys continue to build this year. And thank you again for spending time with us, man. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Tim.